So welcome to Myths on African Motives, and in this lesson we want to take a look at Combined Science June 2026 exam preparation. So these kind of lessons are lessons that will help you to prepare for June 26 specifically examinations. So you will find most of them, they might be very helpful to you. So in this video, we want to start with paper 1 under specialized cell. So the series of videos that I'll be making will be videos that will be based on certain topics. So I'll be just topical. So in all of this video, we are going to talk about specialized cells. So specialized cells, when you deal with specialized cell, we are basically trying to say that these cells, which we call specialized cells, they have a specific function. There's a specific what? Function. So these cells will be structured in a way that they will be able to perform a specific function. And if you can remember from your biology, you know that most cells, they contain three things which are part of what is known as the protoplasm. So we would say that the protoplasm has three things, and these are, we have the nucleus, we have another one which is the cytoplasm, and we also have the last one, the third one, which is what? The cell membrane. So when we look at all the cells that we have, they have all these three things that are there. So now, because they want to be performing functions that are different from each other, you'd find one has to go to the brain, and the brain cells would have another structure which is quite different from the other cells, which are probably found in the muscles. But all of them, they would have to contain those three basic things of the protoplasm. So when we talk about specialized cell or specialization of cells, we are just basically trying to talk about specific features on each cell which make it to be adaptable to their function as those cells. So I will start with the first question. So I'd have to start with the first question here. The question reads, the diagram shows a sperm cell, right? So we have a sperm cell right here, and in the sperm cell, if we are to label the sperm cell, here would have the nucleus, and here would have the tail, and here we would have the head of the sperm cell, and normally the head of the sperm cell, it contains acrosome. So acrosome, these are enzymes that are responsible for normally digesting the pathway when the sperm wants to enter into the egg. And in the middle section here, we normally have a vast mitochondria. We have mitochondria, and normally these mitochondria, they help in producing ATP, which is the energy that is required for the sperm. So as we all know that once a man deposits the sperms into the woman, then the sperms, they have to swim themselves to reach the oviduct, where they would have fertilization taking place down there. So for them to swim all the way to the oviduct, they require a tail, and this tail would help them so that they can be able to maneuver. And that energy for the tail is found in the mitochondria. The mitochondria produces that, and then this nucleus is the one that would then have to fuse with the nucleus of the egg. But before it fuses, for the sperm to enter into the ovum, or into the egg, it requires an acrosomal enzymes. These enzymes, they digest the pathway such that they may be able to enter. So having looked at the history of the sperm cell, we now go to our question, and the question reads, which part contains genetic material responsible for fertilization? So we're going to touch the part that contains genetic material. It has to be the nucleus. So we have our answers. The tail, no, the tail is for swimming. The middle section, no, the middle section is for energy, for the ATP to be produced. Then the nucleus, yes, it's responsible for the DNA. Then the acrosome, no, the acrosome, it has to deal with what? The enzymes. So if you look at our question, we have addressed all, and then C is our answer. So if for each and every question that we would read, you would discover that I would have to take much more time in analyzing what we have been given before I read the question. So the normal thing that you're supposed to do is that you're supposed to read the question carefully. And if you look at most exams that you have, the first instructions, they tell you to read the questions carefully. Read the question carefully, study the question before you then read what is demanded by the question, right? Then let's go to the second one. A red blood cell contains a high concentration of high hemoglobin, and so whilst it contains the high concentration of high hemoglobin, we need to understand what high hemoglobin is and what is its function. So high hemoglobin, primarily it is the red pigment that is found in blood, and that red pigment, it is responsible for carrying oxygen and carbon dioxide. So the red pigment, which is hemoglobin, that it is responsible for doing what? For carrying it is responsible for carrying oxygen and carbon dioxide. Then the question was, what is the main function of this pigment? So the main function of the pigment, the red pigment, which is hemoglobin, A, to fight against infections. No, it doesn't fight against infections. What actually fights against infections, they are the white blood cells. Then to catalyze metabolic reactions. No, to catalyze metabolic reactions, it means to speed up metabolic reactions. So to speed up metabolic reactions, we require enzymes. Then C, to transport oxygen around the body. Yes. Then D, to help the blood clot during injury. So what helps blood clot during injury is not what? The hemoglobin, but what helps are the platelets. These platelets. So you find out that as we do our revision, you later on find out we would keep on repeating, because there's just a twist into the questions that come specifically when they talk about specialized cell. So revising a lot of questions will help us to really understand the concept, because there are many twists that come with the questions, right? So we go to the third question. The third question reads, the diagram shows a root hair cell. So we have a root hair cell. So normally, if we are to break here, normally this is the side where it is inside the root, and this side normally it's inside the soil. So this one gets to be this part here gets to be the one that gets into the soil. So what gets into the soil is the root hair itself, and then the root, that's the hair part, and then the cell actually is inside the root. So it then says the cell wall on the hair-like projection is very thin. So the cell wall is very thin. So we see here this cell, we see here that the cell wall is very thin. So the fact that it is very thin, since we are saying that this is in the soil, so suggestively there are things that are supposed to enter into the root hair. Are we together? So if there are things that are supposed to enter, let's just imagine. Let's say we want something to enter, and then this is the barrier, and then we want something to pass via this barrier, and then this is, let's say this is thin, and then we create another one which is more thicker, and then we want it to pass through this barrier, so this is thick. So suggest by just analyzing the two, it is easy for something to pass through a thin, and it requires less effort for it to pass through a thin layer than it requires to pass through a thick layer. Therefore, we are saying that this distance here, we have a distance. So the distance that an object has to travel here is small, and the distance that it has to travel across here, distance here, is long. So in other words, we would have said that the distance of a thin object is small. So a smaller distance would facilitate a faster movement. So after we have analyzed our question in terms of that, let's now look at what it is saying. So it says, how does this adaptation, which adaptation? Very thin. How does this adaptation help the cell? How does the adaptation help the cell? So A, it allows more light to reach the cell. No, we are saying that this is in the soil, so we can't be having more light into the cell. And mind you, light has to be collected with chloroplast, so we don't necessarily have chloroplast in the cell. Then B, it reduces the distance for water to enter the cell. So it reduces the distance for water to enter the cell. So as I was saying earlier on when I talked about distance, it reduces the distance, right? So this one, we can take this one. Then C, it makes the cell stronger for pushing through soil. Not necessarily, because we are saying that the wall itself is very thin. So we are not necessarily saying that it makes it stronger for pushing through the soil. Then D, it prevents minerals from leaving the cell. No, it doesn't prevent minerals from leaving the soil. So the answer that we are left with is B. Then let's go to the other question, number 4. Which specialized cell is adapted to swim towards, which is adapted to swim towards an egg? So when you talk about the swimmers, these are sperms, right? Sperms swim, and so we have sperms here, and the sperms go towards the egg cell during using a long whip-like tail. So we're saying that these are sperms, right? They have a tail, they are like this. So A, red blood cell. No, red blood cells, they are responsible for oxygen and carbon dioxide being carried around the body. Then sperm cell, yes. Muscle cells, No, muscle cells, these ones are responsible for contractions and relaxation such that we can have movement. Then root hair cell, no, root hair cell doesn't swim, right? Root hair cell is responsible for absorbing minerals and water from the soil. So these ones are not okay. So our answer is B. So number 4 is B. Then we go to number 5. The diagram shows a muscle cell. Now we are on muscle cells. But as we are looking at the muscle cell here, let's possibly just try to analyze the muscle cell. Maybe probably you're new to it and you have not seen it maybe in this way. When you look at the muscle cell, we see that there are funny things here. They are very numerous. There are many. These guys, their name is mitochondria. So as we had said earlier on, mitochondria produces ATP, which is our energy. So in other words, this type of cell, which is the muscle cell, it has a lot of energy. And this lot of energy is required for movement, because you find out that when we want to move, when our bodies are moving, they require a lot of muscle action. The muscles are always contracting and relaxing many times during the day. So even when you are just seated, there is another cell which is contracted and another cell which is relaxed for you to maintain that posture. So that maintenance of that posture would require energy from the mitochondria. So the question now says, why does this cell contain many protein fibers arranged in parallel? So we have this protein filament, these protein fibers, they are arranged in parallel, right? So they are arranged parallel to each other. So that's what we have to see. Why are they arranged what? Parallel. Are we together? So A, to store large amount of glycogen. No. To allow the cell to shorten or contract. So now we have something. You can say, this one can be the answer. Because if they were twisted, right? If they were twisted or mixed, let's say for example, this one was mixed with this one and this one mixed. If let's say number 1 contracts and number 2 relaxes and number 3 contracts, would then end up having a movement which is not coordinated. In other words, there will be lumps where there are contractions and lumps where there are relaxations. They wouldn't mix. But let's say for example you have the human arm. Let's say for example it's like this, and you have muscles here. Let's say this is the human arm and we have muscles here. Are we together? And your hand is holding, maybe it's holding a ball right here. So what happens is that this muscle A and we have muscle B. So what's happening there is that when this muscle A contracts, this muscle B is supposed to relax. So for the contraction of muscle A to happen whilst this one is relaxing, it requires the muscles or the protein fibers to be arranged in parallel. Saka nyango kana uchitodya nyama chaiyo, you'd see that the muscles are parallel. You'd see, especially when you're taking in beef, try to pull it out, you discover that the beef would be in strands. They will be like in strands that are joined together to form a piece of steak. So we are supporting our answer so that they shorten and contract. And we look at another answer, C, to absorb oxygen from the blood. No, what absorbs oxygen from the blood? We are talking of what? The hemoglobin. We are talking of that as the thing that absorbs oxygen. Then D, to carry electrical signals quickly. No, it is not so that they can carry electrical signals quickly, but it is to allow to make the cell shorten or contract. So our answer is going to be B. Then we look at number 6. Number 6, a farmer notices that his crops were wilting. He notices that his crops were wilting. Despite, so wilting, it leads to the crop drying up. It means that the crop is not receiving enough water. So if it is not receiving enough water, probably there is something that has happened to the plant that is enabling it not to receive water. So it says that it is wilting despite water being available in the soil. So we are now saying that this plant it has water available, but it is wilting. So probably there is a problem with the roots. So which part of the plant is most likely to be damaged or underdeveloped? So there's supposed to be something that would be in the roots. So because the roots are the ones that are taking in, right? So xylem vessels, no, because for xylem vessels, they are responsible for transporting the water that has been taken inside. So the water is already inside, it has already been taken in. Then palisade cells, no, palisade cells are responsible for photosynthesis. Then C, root hair cells. Yes, root hair cells. And remember, root hair cells, if we are to go to this, the root hair cells like this, it is the one that is within the soil. So we were saying that in the soil, that's where there is what? There is water. So for the water to be taken in, there's this root hair cell is supposed to be what? It's supposed to be functioning. It's supposed to be developed. So going to our question, we support the root hair cells. And D, stomata. Stomata, they are found on the plant leaf. So we are talking, stomata is just an opening. It's an opening on the what? On the plant leaves. So when you talk of stomata, we talk of transpiration. That's where water comes out from and it is lost to the environment. So our answer for question number 6 is C. Then we go to number 7. Which of the following correctly matches the specialized cell with its primary function? So we want to correctly match the specialized cell to its primary function. So notice this thing, primary function. A primary function is the prime function of something. It is the first function. Something can have auxiliary functions or other functions, but the prime is what it mainly does. So let's look at this. Red blood cells fighting against infection. No, red blood cells, their primary function is what? Is to carry oxygen and carbon dioxide such that there can be gaseous exchange. Then sperm cell carrying oxygen, no, that's the responsibility for red blood cells. Sperm cells are responsible for the reproduction. Then C, root hair cell absorbing water. Yes, the root hair cell's primary function is to absorb water and minerals. So absorbing water, it's its primary function. Then muscle cell transporting food. No, muscle cells, they are responsible for movement, for locomotion. That is the movement of organs, the movement of the body as per se. So when they contract and relax, they help the body to move. That's the special function for muscle cells. So our answer here, it becomes C. So as you can see, we have to read all the answers and we have to relate our answers to what the question demands. Always know what the question demands and then you can get to have an answer. Then we go to number 8. Number 8 then says the diagram shows a cross-section of a root. Now, when you learn about the root, right, you just learn that the root has a structure like this. This is a generalized structure, and you have something like this. Here we have this. Okay. So the structure will be like this. Here, and then you have the xylem, and you have these guys which are called what? Phloem, right? And you have this one which is the root hair, right? So now you then encounter something like this which is a little bit different, right? So what you don't have to mind all of these things that they're giving you, so that they can give you a lot of confusion, right? So you just have to master what would be like this. You have to master the main parts. You have the root hair, right? So the question then says the cells on the outer layer are specialized for absorption. So these are the cells that we want to look at, right? Which are the root hair. So in other words, the whole question was just pointing you out to the root hair, not to the whole of the thing. Then the question says, what would happen if these cells were missing? What would happen if these cells were missing? So if the root hair cells came missing, it means that our root would not be able to absorb the what? The water. And if it has no water, it means that the plant would what? Plant wilts. Are we together? So we have our answers. The plant would photosynthesize more. No. For it to photosynthesize more, it needs to have more leaves. B, the plant will be unable to take up water and minerals. Yes, that's true. It won't be able to take up water and minerals. Then the plant would grow taller. No, it wouldn't. Then the plant would produce flowers earlier. No, it wouldn't. So our answer here was going to be B. Then we go to number 9. What specialized feature do sperm cells have? What specialized feature do sperm cells have that provides energy needed for their long journey? So remember, the sperm cell redu patamborita pekutangisisa apa. Patarita pekutangisisa. We talked of the sperm cell having this middle part where there are a lot of mitochondria. So these mitochondria provide ATP, which is what? Which is the energy required for the tail to swim. So let's go to our question. So then the question would ask you to find what feature is it that is specialized for that. So the feature that's specialized for that is what? It's mitochondria. So let's look at our answers. A, large nucleus. No. Many mitochondria in the middle section. Yes, exactly. So this is good. Then C, a thin cell membrane. Thin cell membrane. No, not necessarily, because a thin cell membrane is not aiding their long journey, right? We know that it has a thin cell membrane, but it is not aiding its journey. Then D, a hair-like projection for sensing chemicals. No, no, no. That hair-like projection, that's the tail. It allows it to swim. So, mind you, the question was wanting a feature that provides energy. So the one that would provide energy is mitochondria. So our answer is B. Then we go to number 10. The diagram shows a red blood cell. So this red blood cell, we have it has a biconcave. So its biconcave shape is an adaptation 4. So as you can see, its biconcave shape is the one which is represented in this way. So it's biconcave. So you'd see that at the middle it is thin, then it is thick in the ends. So the ends are thick and the middle is thin. So that on its own, it helps the cell to have an increased surface area to volume ratio. So it will be increased surface area to volume ratio. Those not it one biconcave. Then this biconcave, if we were to look at it, it appears like a plate. So A for answer, its biconcave is an adaptation for A. It's an A. Answer says carrying a nucleus. No, actually this has no nucleus. So when red blood cells are mature, so we have to know that mature red blood cells have no nucleus. So we can't necessarily say that a red blood cell does not have a nucleus, but a mature red blood cell does not have a nucleus. Then B says increasing the surface area for oxygen absorption. Well, this one, it aligns with its purpose. Then C, attaching to other blood cells. No. Then moving through the blood by swimming. No, these ones, they don't swim. These ones, they don't swim. So our answer would be B. It is to increase the surface area for absorption. Then we look at number 11. Number 11 says, a student observes specialized cells under a microscope and notes. So he or she observes it under in a microscope and notes that it has a long tail and many mitochondria packed in the middle. So what is it that has a long tail and then many mitochondria that are packed in the middle? So as we can see, this is a sperm cell. So the cell is most likely to be a red blood cell, no. A muscle cell, no. Though muscle cells do have many mitochondria, the mitochondria, they are not packed in the middle. We can see from this, the muscle cell here, they are not packed in the middle, but rather the sperm cell, we have the muscles being packed at the middle. And so C is okay. Then D, the root hair cells, no. The root hair cells, they don't have mitochondria packed at the middle, though they require a substantial amount of mitochondria for their active uptake. So C is the answer. Then we have number 12. Which statement best explains why red blood cells lose their nucleus when they mature? It reads, which statement best explains why red blood cells, so why red blood cells lose their nucleus when they mature. So this nucleus, when it gets lost, so it would create somehow it would create space, because the space that it occupied is no longer occupied with any other thing, right? So to make room for more hemoglobin to carry oxygen, so we'll give this. Then to prevent the cell from dividing uncontrollably, not necessarily. Then to allow the cell to live longer, no. To help fight against infections, no, it doesn't do that. So the most probable answer is A, to make room for hemoglobin to carry oxygen. Then we move to question number 13. So question number 13, the diagram shows sperms approaching an egg cell. So we have a sperm cell approaching an egg cell. So as it approaches, we have here the sperm here, and we have a labeled X. We have that part that has been labeled X. And then the question says, the part labeled X at the tip of the head contains enzymes. So this part contains enzymes. What is its function? So if we were to look at the sperm here, and we have its head, would have the nucleus, and would have something around here, and we said that this is what we call acrosome, and it contains acrosomal enzyme. Are we together? So an enzyme, it catalyzes a reaction. So the reaction for an acrosome is to break the wall of what, of this. So as you can see here, we have the wall here. Let me just try to zoom it out. We have here, we have that enzyme. We have the wall. This is the wall of the what, of the cell, of the female cell, right? The egg cell. And then the tip here is where we have the acrosome. So the acrosome is responsible for that. When it touches with this, it is able to digest it, such that when it digests it, the nucleus then enters and then goes to meet with the nucleus of the female cell. So when the nucleus of the female cell meets with that, then would have fertilization taking place. Is that okay? So the question, we go back to the question, what is the function of this X? So the function of that tip is to what? To provide these enzymes. So A, to provide energy for swimming, no, that's the function of the tail. B, to penetrate the outer layer of the egg. Yes. Why would we say yes? Because it contained an enzyme which breaks the outer layer of the egg so that we can enter. Then C, to store genetic material. No, the storing of genetic material is done by the nucleus. And then D, to control the direction of movement. No, it doesn't control the direction of movement. So our answer becomes B. Then we go to number 14. A plant root hair cell has a large permanent vacuole. A plant root hair cell, it has a large permanent vacuole. What is the main function of this structure in water absorption? So what we need to know is the vacuole itself. So if we are to draw the plant cell, it's more like this. and then we have this vacuole. So vacuole, and after the vacuole we have the nucleus, right? And then after that we then have the, so it's just, this one is just a generalized plant cell. We have the cytoplasm. So then what happens is that this vacuole inside here, it contains salts. So we have salts and sugars. So these salts and sugars, they help the water, the plant to absorb water. Why? Because here we have a low concentration of what? Of H2O, water, right? So what then happens is that water is then drawn from the outside to enter into the plant, because it causes what? An osmotic pressure, which then pushes, or which then attracts water into the cell. So that osmotic pressure, it draws in water. Let's say, for example, you want to dry, possibly you want to dry meat. You use salt. Why? Because salt has a power to draw water. It has a power to draw water to itself because it has a low concentration of water. So water would have to move from outside the cell into what? The cell by osmosis. So this is the osmosis that's taking place. So let's go to our question and then we go to the answers. So what is the main function of this structure in water absorption? So the main function of the vacuole in water absorption. So A, it contains enzymes to digest minerals. No. It pushes the cell membrane against the cell wall, creating suction. It pushes the cell wall. It pushes the cell membrane against the cell wall, creating suction. Let's leave it for a moment. It stores waste products from the cell. No. It provides structural support to the hair-like projections. No. So now let's look at this B, because it is the one that is relating to water absorption. So it would push the membrane against the cell wall, creating suction. So once it pushes the membrane against the wall, it creates what? A suction. Then let's go to number 15. Number 15, which specialized cell would you expect to find in large numbers in an athlete's leg muscles? So the one that is in an athlete's leg muscle, the athlete normally does a lot of activity. So since an athlete does a lot of activity, the athlete requires energy. So the thing that would see being in the muscles of the athlete after years of training, it's supposed to be mitochondria. So for our answer, A, red blood cells, not per se. B, sperm cells, no. Muscle cells with many mitochondria, yes. Then root hair cells, no. So our answer for number 15 was going to be C. Then we go to number 16. The diagram shows a red blood cell in a capillary. So we have red blood cells within a capillary here. So these are the red blood cells, and the capillary is this one. And so it's flexible. Nature allows it to. So the red blood cells flexible nature allows it to squeeze through the narrow blood vessels. So as you can see here, it is squeezing through, right? So it's okay. To divide and produce more red blood cells, no. To attract oxygen molecules, no. To attract oxygen molecules, it's supposed to be the hemoglobin. That's what does that. To stick to the capillary walls, no. So our answer was A. Then we go to the next question, number 17. A plant growing in nutrient-poor soil develops extremely long root hairs. So this is a nutrient-poor soil where this plant is. But this plant develops long root hairs. Its root hairs are long. Why are they long? They're trying to search for nutrients, right? That's why they are long. They are searching for nutrients, right? Then this is an adaptation to reach deeper water sources. First of all, let's try to look at the soil type. It is poor soil. It is poor soil. It was poor nutrient soil. So this guy is nutrient poor, not necessarily saying that the plant doesn't have water. It's nutrient poor. So we leave this one for now. Then B, increase in surface area for mineral absorption. Yes, they are long, which means they would have an increased surface area for mineral absorption. Then C, to store more food. No. Then D, to support the plant against strong winds. No. So the question now goes to what was the center of focus. Yes, the root hairs sometimes become longer so that they can reach the water sources, right? But in this case, we have issue of the nutrient. So we are addressing the issue of the nutrient. The nutrient here, we're talking of the minerals. So the root hair, they will be long so that they can have more nutrients. They can access more nutrients by having a more broader surface or a greater surface area for that mineral absorption. So our answer is B. And then we go to number 18. What would happen to a sperm cell if the mitochondria in the middle section failed to function? So we talked earlier on that mitochondria are required for energy. So which means if they fail to function, this guy doesn't have energy that is sufficient. So for our answers, it would not be able to find the egg cell. Let's wait, the English there is, it would not be able to find. Yes, to find. So let's wait. It would not be able to swim and would run out of energy. Yes, it would run out of energy and it won't be able to swim. So this one at least better. C, it would not be able to penetrate the egg cell. No, the issue of penetrating the egg cell is not about power, but it's about having acrosomes, the enzymes which would digest its pathway. So this one is not it. Then it would not carry genetic material. No, the genetic material is coded for in DNA. So the answer that would be most appropriate is B. Then we wouldn't take A because of this, unable to find an egg cell. No, not necessarily. Then number 19, the diagram shows a muscle cell, and on this muscle cell, which statement correctly describes a feature of the cell and its adaptation? So we want a feature of the cell and its adaptation. So for a particular feature, we must have a corresponding function. So we have the feature and its function relating. Many nuclei, so many nuclei to control different section of muscles. Many chloroplasts, no, it doesn't have chloroplasts. Long tail to allow movement of the body, it doesn't have the long tail here. Large vacuole to store water for cooling, doesn't have. I've made, oh, this one was a tricky question. So we are now left with this one that I've once condemned. So many nuclei, so we find ourselves having many nuclei. There are many nuclei in the tissue. So we have many nuclei, so these many nuclei would maybe possibly control different sections of the muscle cells. So that's the most appropriate. The other ones, they are way too far, because we can't say that they are chloroplasts. No chloroplasts. For C, we can't say that they have a long tail to allow movement through the body. No, they don't move through the body, these guys. Then D, a large vacuole. There's no vacuole there. So the most correct one, the most correct would be that it has many nuclei to control different sections of the muscles. Then we go to number 20. Which pair of specialized cells both have adaptations of large surface area to volume ratio? So we want adaptations for large surface area to volume ratio. So sperm cells and muscle cells. So when we talk about an adaptation with large surface area to volume ratio, we want something that has to deal with absorption, right? It has to be something that has to deal with absorption of some sort. So sperm cell and muscle cell, these guys, they are not involved in any absorption. Then red blood cells and root hair cells. So red blood cells, they are for absorption of oxygen. Root hair cells, they are for absorption of what? Water and minerals. So we have this one, okay? Then muscle cell and red blood cell. Muscle cell is not absorbing. Then this one is absorbing. So overally no. Sperm cell and root hair cell. Sperm cell is not doing any absorption, whilst root hair is doing so. So we are left with B as the most probable answer for what we did. So as you can see from number 1 up to number 20, we were mainly focusing on the paper 1 questions. How would they come if we are asked about specialized cell? Specialized cell, what would it be like? So as you can see, we're primarily talking about the adaptation of a cell to its function. So in the next video, I'll be talking about structured questions that would be on specialized cell. Then after structured questions, we would also talk about the long questions. If they would come, what would be a thing that would be common to that? So thank you so much for watching the video up to this end.